Good evening. My name is Tim Gibbs with the Delaware Academy of Medicine, the Delaware Public Health Association. Welcome to the final session of the 2024 Early Spring South Edition of Delaware Mini Medical School. I'm joined by co-host Christy Handley. And this was the session that was rescheduled from earlier when our presenter's household came down sick. As I mentioned at the time, it happens even to healthcare providers. So as always, here's the social media. You all have heard exhaustively about the program and the program goals. Housekeeping tips, everyone should be familiar with by now. Just to repeat, however, ask your questions in the Q&A. We'll answer some of them. We'll defer others to our presenter, who will answer them at the conclusion of his presentation. Christy represents the Sussex County Health Coalition, and she's talked about that for 5 sessions now, so hopefully you've retained some of that. Delaware Youth Medical Academy, since this is the final session, those of you who either attended all 6 sessions or attended 5 sessions and have done a makeup session, and if you've attended 5 and you still need to do a makeup session, we will get in contact with you, but you'll qualify to become a member of the Delaware Youth Medical Academy. We are today at Broken Bones and Then Some, Life of a Pediatric Orthopedic Surgeon, and I'll turn it over to Christy to introduce this evening's speaker. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tim, and thank you, Dr. Connor, for joining us this evening. I'm going to quickly go over Dr. Connor's bio information, and you can reference this back on the website when you can view the recording. So Dr. Justin Connor is a board-certified pediatric orthopedic surgeon. His private practice is Growing Bones Pediatric and Neuromuscular Institute. They provide care for children's orthopedic injuries and conditions. He treats children as well as those over 18 with pediatric neuromuscular conditions. His private practice is affiliated with Bay Health Hospital Kent and the Bay Health Milford Memorial Hospital. Dr. Connor earned a medical degree from Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, Missouri, and completed his orthopedic surgery residency at Howard University Hospital in Washington, D.C. He went on to complete a pediatric orthopedic surgery fellowship at Alfred I. DuPont Hospital for Children, which is now Nemours, in Wilmington, Delaware, and joined their medical staff as a pediatric orthopedic surgeon with the neuromuscular division. During this time, he led the orthopedic branch of the spina bifida program and was an interpreting physician in their nationally accredited gait and motion analysis lab. Most recently, Dr. Connor practiced as a pediatric orthopedic surgeon at Overland Park Regional Medical Center in Overland Park, Kansas, before returning to Central Delaware to open his medical practice. It is based in Delaware. He specializes in pediatric and neuromuscular orthopedics. He is strongly committed to extending comprehensive orthopedic services to all children and those affected by neuromuscular disorders in Delaware. He also serves a critical need for adult transitional services for those with pediatric neuromuscular disorders that are no longer eligible to receive care from pediatric providers as they age. These conditions are often diagnosed at birth and require specialized care and treatment. Over the years, Dr. Connor has treated a range of general orthopedic issues in children and completed many surgeries. His active clinical and academic research interests are in children's health and the orthopedic treatment of cerebral palsy and other neuromuscular disorders. He is a current member of the Pediatric Orthopedic Society of North America and the American Academy for Cerebral Palsy and Developmental Medicine. He also serves on the board of directors for the United Cerebral Palsy of Delaware. Thank you again, Dr. Connor, and we're going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Oh, there we go. My screen cut out for a minute. So thank you for that introduction. Also, just thank you all for just your flexibility. As you said, even doctors need doctors sometimes. So it just happens on occasion. So I will share my screen and And hopefully everyone is able to see everything okay. If not,
Yep.
that out, great, fantastic. Really this is going to be probably a little bit different than a talk than what we're used to, because I sort of sat down and just, you know, we sort of talk about what is, being a doctor, why do we do this? I think this is sort of the conversation that questions I wanted to know when I was in high school. I'll put it that way. And that's sort of the way that I came across it, because there's so many ways to talk about things, right? We can be very academic and talk about it, all the cerebral things. We can talk about the disease, we can talk about treatments, we can talk about all these different things, which, we will to some extent today. But, I think that, one of the biggest questions for me was, when someone sort of presented to me, well, why do you want to be a doctor? And sort of, that's the question you sort of ask ever since you're, for some of us, ever since we're 5 years old. So some of us decide a little later on down the line, but it's really just sort of, what is this thing that we call being a doctor? What is this thing about being a surgeon or any kind of doctor, really? And you've heard from lots of different specialties and doctors and health professionals, throughout this course. And it's all different perspectives. Um, Interestingly, it's all the same human body. It's all the same organism, and we're all connected, even though we look at different aspects of the human body and the human condition. We all are doing a very similar service for our patients. So we're gonna talk about broken bones, then some, and just sort of what it's like to be a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. And so just in terms of disclosures, which just basically means, there's nothing that I'm doing that's going to be financially associated with this presentation or anything else like that. Most of us put this presentation just so that 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 there's not any kind of conflict of interest that you might have. So,
Doctor, could you drop into presentation mode, please?
Let's see.
I think if you click resume slideshow.
There we go.
There you go. Thank you.
I'm not the best. I'm not the best at technical support, so thank you. So I'm hoping to have a little bit of fun today, and I'm hoping to make this interactive. It may not work. I guarantee you, it may not work. But I've sort of seen this before, and I wanted to try it out. So if you've ever done sort of the sort of polling system, you're welcome to join. You're welcome not to join. It's just to try to get a little communication between, yourself and myself as we're doing this. The virtual world, I don't get to look at it and see it. And there are going to be a couple of questions that as we come up, if you want to participate, a couple different ways to do that. You can scan the QR code at the top and answer the questions as they come up. You can also send a text message and with the ABCD to that number up there or log in. So looks like some people already sort of joining in here, where we're sort of seeing what grade you're in. So just seeing the mix of people here, and pretty interesting. And this is all live and this is real time. I'm not doing any of this. So yeah, so we have about 60. Oh, well, that's still changing here. I haven't actually done this in a presentation before, so this is just interesting. So we have a lot of 11th and 12th graders. Looks like we have a good amount of 9th and 10th graders, almost an even split. A few folks who are in college, and then we have our early achievers in 6th and 8th grade. So yeah, so fantastic. So we have a huge mix here, but we have a lot of folks who are in high school and sort of still making that decision as to what do we want to do with our career, what do we want to do in life. I think that's pretty cool. So I'm just sort of stepping back, asking this question: well, why do you want to be a doctor, right? So we sort of see who's here. Why do we want to be a doctor? And when I'm asked that question, it sort of changes over the years. I think it evolves as you evolve as just a person. But you know, a couple things that I've sort of looked at is with anything that you do, you know, you want to start with why. There's a couple of books here, and I put these books up here just because they're sort of personal favorites of mine. But one is just starting with why. Um, if you know why you want to do anything in life, and that's medicine, that's a career, that's buying a house in a certain neighborhood or buying a certain car or whatever it is. If you know why you want to do something, the how becomes a lot less complicated. If you know, it's sort of you can really move mountains when you have a strong reason to do something. And I would encourage you as you go along this path to write down why you want to do what you want to do. In medicine in particular, you'll notice that along the way, some people sort of lose that enthusiasm. They lose why they decided to go to do what they wanted to do, and you get a bit jaded, you get a bit upset, you get a little bit frustrated, and those things are all part of life. You're going to be up late nights studying, you're going to be taking tests and exams, and why am I going through all this? Why am I putting myself through this? And it really does help to know why. For me, I originally wanted to work with children. Just in general, I had a great pediatrician and just really fun for me. I also wanted to um, I also wanted to be able to offer medical services just to the masses in general. Actually, interesting wanted to sort of work on the insurance side because I thought it was unfair that some people had insurance, and some didn't, and some people could get access, and some didn't. But it really just came down to sort of access to care. So I want to give access to as many kids as I wanted, as could be taken care of. So that was sort of the why. And it's interesting when you look back 20 years as to why you said you wanted to do something, where your career is, why you moved to an area where there's a low, where there isn't as many professionals of what you do, and that you're there to increase access, increase care, and you look back at 20 years ago when you said why you want to do something and how much your life actually cares up to that. The second is the compound effects. So this is just, it's sort of the principle of compound interest, right? So we probably all learned that in math, how a little bit over time can roll and snowball into something more and more. And it's just the principle of that if you do small things now and you do small things continuously, and they multiply on themselves to give you a large effect. So, the test that you're studying for now and the role and the play that you're doing now and the extra effort that you're putting in now may not seem like much now, but small things done continuously over a long period of time yield exceptional results. And so, those are sort of my sort of two favorite concepts: knowing why you're doing something, and then taking small changes over time and having big results. So I want to know why you want to be a physician. So this is what we call a word cloud. So you can literally type in sort of your responses, and they'll pop up on the screen. And so and the more that people respond, the larger the responses will be that come in. So we'll sort of see if anybody sort of has an idea of why they want to be in this position. And I think it's always sort of limited to a couple of words. So, and I don't actually know how this works on the phone, but it may be interesting. Oh, here we go. All right, so this is just the word that people are typing in of what they want to do, why they want to do it. The ones that are typed in most frequently are going to be the ones that are larger. Um, and so we will talk about these things. Um, what people want to do, and they want to be doctors and physicians, work in their community. Obviously, financial is important, so that's actually going to be a part of this talk. Wellness. This is always pretty cool. You just see all the different reasons why people are doing epilepsy. I see is in here. So if someone knows specifically what they want to do and how they want to affect people. Healthcare, they want to be beneficial. They want to help others. Want to work in their community. So it's a positivity research. So they want to have an impact. Lots of things coming in. So I think you sort of see, even if you just sort of look at your response, but then you also look at the response of those around you. A lot of us have very similar reasons as to why we want to do what we want to do, and ultimately, a lot of us want to make an impact in other people's lives in a positive way, right? And and we also want to be compensated for it as well. So we don't ignore that part of it as well. It's a dream for many. They want to work in their community. So I'll move on just because it's I think the responses are going to keep coming in as people put them in, but I think you sort of get the idea. So as we're sort of talking about that, we might as well, how long does it take to become a doctor? So this is for being for a pediatric orthopedic surgeon specifically. So we're going to do our 12 years of high school. And then we're going to do some more school. And so if you add all that up after high school, so after you get that high school diploma, how many more years until you can sort of get that certification to work in the United States? Yep. A lot of people are sort of coming in. All right. So about half of you say about 12 years, after high school. And that's a very good number right there. So actually to become a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, so we'll sort of go through that process. It took 14 years after high school. So you consider in 1997, I graduated high school. Then I went to college for 4 years. That's 4. And then you add another 4 years of medical school. So now we're at 8. And then I did an orthopedic surgery residency. So residency is sort of that additional training where you get a specialty as a doctor. And so the timelines are different. Surgery is different from medicine, and that's different from neurology, and that's different from neurosurgery. So they're all different. But orthopedic surgery is 5 years. So now we're at 13 years. And then to be a specialist to work with children, that was an addition. So that was 14 years, following school. And so, it's, well, so you're doing all this school and you're sort of expected to decide, well, what kind of doctor do you want, right? So and the interesting thing is you have to sort of make this life choice sort of pretty quickly because your parents are paying a lot of money for you to go to medical school. And they would like you to figure this out while the time is sort of, so we're not adding extra time onto this thing. So sort of, I sort of look at it, how do you want to help people or what setting would you like to help them, right? So in medicine, you can sort of break things down as to being, it can be something surgical, right? So you can do like I sort of do things to people, right? I try to do an intervention and I try to, with that intervention, directly affect something like a broken bone. It could be something non-surgical. So things where you're helping people, but you're not operating on them, but you're still helping them. You're still doing things just like like your primary care doctor might. You may want to be academic. So there's folks who help create medicine. There are folks who help create research on how do we solve cancer. So you can help people that way. You can be administrative. You can run a hospital, literally. You can run a health system. You can affect the lives of thousands of people. You can also work in public health, especially recently with COVID. That's what our government relied on to make a lot of decisions. Was those who were specialists in public health and the delivery of health and the treatment. So those are sort of main categories. You can also decide sort of what setting do you want to help people, right? Do you want to be their primary care doctor? Do you want to grow up with them? Do you want to treat their whole family? Do you want to sort of be that person on the front line? Do you want to be a specialist? If there's something like epilepsy that you're very interested in and you want to be able to help people with a specific problem, do you want to be in emergency care? People who acutely have something happen to them and you want to be able to affect them there. We talked about research. We talked about making policies in the government. So that's sort of in the public health thing. So you can also have different settings where you help people. So, sort of thing, how you want to in general, and then more specifically, what kinds of people do you want to work with? Even down to forensics, where you're sort of working with those who aren't with us anymore, but you're really you're figuring out a story, sort of like CSI. So I think they introduced me earlier with sort of what I did to get here, but my story was that I grew up in South Florida. I did my undergraduate at Morehouse College. That's a small liberal arts college in Atlanta, Georgia. And I do bring that up to say that you don't have to go to an Ivy League. You don't have to go to a top 10 school for any of these different things. I did have offers at some of these different places. And there's nothing bad or nothing wrong about any of them. But, if you work hard and you commit yourself, you can make your way from any of these colleges, organizations, different things like that. So I just make the point that you don't necessarily have to be at the largest school in the country in order to be a physician. You can also see their track records of people that have gone before you, whether it's small schools and large schools. Small schools have great programs too. So from there, from Morehouse, I went to Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, Missouri, which is a wonderful medical school. Enjoyed it a lot. From there, I went to Howard University Hospital, so that's in DC, where I did my orthopedic surgery residency. From there, I went to the Moores, which is a top 10 location for children. And then sort of did some work while I was there in some of their areas. And then just really felt called to sort of do something a little bit different in a bit different location. And so actually, founded a practice down in Dover, Delaware, to really focus on treating our kids locally in Kent, Sussex, and to some extent Maryland counties that are surrounding. So this was my why, right? So my why is because I like to work with kids, and I wanted to deal with these unfair differences, in society that I saw, and I wanted to help create equity for different people. And for those who don't know what equity is, it's we all come from different places, and ideally we want everyone to have the same result, the same outcome. Some people need a little bit more to get them to that outcome. Some people need a little bit less, but we like everyone to have the same good outcome, no matter where they're from. So that was really my why. And so sort of also talking about, well, why orthopedics? So, right. So now that's why I get into medicine. Well, why orthopedics? Why did I settle on this? So I actually went to medical school to be a pediatrician, so general pediatrician, because I wanted to work with kids and knew that. I had no interest in surgery, interestingly enough. And so I met up, a couple of men who sort of influenced that. The first on the left is Terry Schenecker. He's at the School of Medicine. So he's a pediatric orthopedic surgeon there. He's a fantastic guy. He is one of these guys who, I guess at the time, he must have been in his 60s or late 50s, but now he's probably well to his 70s, but has more energy than a 25-year-old, is just constantly going, loves what he does, loves working with kids, always has a smile on his face, playing with babies, doing all these things, and just made orthopedics look so great. I mean, to the extent where you couldn't ignore it, and really sort of caught my eye and really sort of put me down that path. And then later on at the Moores, the second gentleman there is Freeman Miller, and he works a lot with kids with cerebral palsy, special needs, really has done a lot to really forward that program to be one of the top in the world, really. And just mentoring under him and being able to learn under someone who, as we sort of call him Santa Claus, but he looks a bit like Santa Claus. He has a laugh like Santa Claus. He just loves kids. So these two men just really love kids. And you could see it come across. And they made this look fun. The second sort of major thing that was an influence in my life was, I believe it was between my first and second year in medical school. I volunteered for Habitat for Humanity, and I did it for the whole summer. So, and this just sort of goes into how life circumstances just, everything is important and everything can be helpful. So I volunteered there for a summer, did however many months, we'll say 2 months, basically going out on site every day. Had a great time, great people. This isn't the crew. I sort of pulled this random picture because I don't have a picture of who I was working with, but just had a great time. One of the individuals there happened to be a retired orthopedic surgeon, and he was doing some things with his time and got to work with him. But really liked to work with my hands, liked to work with building things. I think my second job, if I wasn't a physician, was going to be a contractor, building homes and things like that. So I just really liked it, and just sort of introduced me to the idea of orthopedics, the idea of that we use a lot of these similar hammers and nails and screws and plates and all these different things. Just sort of introducing me to the concept. So it's just interesting how these volunteer things that you do that sometimes you're just doing to have it on paper actually can have real effects as to what you decide in your life. So then I came into orthopedics, and then you sort of have this idea of, okay, so now what do I want to do with my work? And so as I was going out, I was sort of deciding what do I want to do and why do I want to do it. It's sort of like, well, what services do you want to do? Well, I want to work with kids, right? So I want to help kids. I want to help kids that have broken bones and injuries and all these different things. So sort of make that a service. But I really like working with kids with cerebral palsy. So let's do that. So this is one of those sort of cool things when you have a private practice, you can sort of do what you want. You can sort of tailor things the way that you want. You can sort of work with the populations that you want. As I mentioned at the beginning, I noticed that there were a good amount of young people who were growing up and they were having problems when they were adults. And so, just because they turned 21 doesn't necessarily mean that their problems were over. And so, pediatric locations are great, but some of them are limited because for obvious reasons, when people are adults, they can only do certain things. So it's like, well, let's do that because we like doing that too. We enjoy doing that. We like helping those people in those populations. So it's really to say that some things in medicine you can really customize to the things you want to do. Do the things you want to do. Don't do the things you don't want to do. There are plenty of patients. There's plenty to go around. Spasticity management. So that's just working with sort of a subset of these patients who just have really tight muscles, don't move very well. We want them to move. Gait analysis, looking at how kids are walking, how we can make them walk better and do better. And sports medicine. So we're having injuries. So there's lots of different things in orthopedics that you can do, but that's sort of how I tailored mine. And then working with kids because kids are unique. They're not just small adults. Some things are only in kids, and that one of these things in a time-sensitive way. And not everyone's comfortable working with children. So just really just working with that population. So looking at a day in my life, right? So a day in my life, and this is just a very general day. But sort of depending on what we're doing, surgeon's day usually is going to start around 6 o'clock. So 6:15 in the morning. And this is sort of on site. So you've already driven to wherever you're going to work. So consider that for those of you who like to sleep. So you may be going to a lecture or didactics or giving a lecture, or listening to a lecture, or working with students before the day gets going. And then by 7 o'clock, you're rounding on the floor. You're doing some consults. You're seeing some things from the night before. And by 7:30, you're usually starting to get going with. Usually that's when most of the surgeries are starting in the operating room, or you're sort of getting ready for the clinic to get going. By 8 o'clock, clinic's going. If you're lucky, you'll get a lunch. The goal is to always get a lunch. But that doesn't always happen, to tell you the truth. And then by 1 o'clock, you're going with clinic again. If you're doing surgery, you're generally doing surgery pretty much through the whole day. And then at the end of the day, after clinic, you're back on the floor, you're doing rounds, you're doing consults, you're sort of seeing those things that you didn't have a chance to see during the day. After that, then you're probably closing some charts because you didn't really have time to close charts during this time. You're busy seeing people. And around 7 o'clock, hopefully you're going home. And then there's this thing called call, which most of us will have the pleasure of learning about. But essentially, for any reason, anyone can call you pretty much 24 hours a day if you're on that call schedule. And be it 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever, you can be called to go out to the emergency room, you can be called to do an emergency service, you can be called to do lots of different things. So, that's sort of the day in the life. So you may get called, you may not. That's just sort of the luck of what happens. And then in addition to that, so that's just sort of the normal day. But for most of us, we also have research that we want to do. We need to do educational things like this, either for others or for ourselves. We may do speaking engagements. A lot of us are involved in community service, or we're on committees or boards. And then, besides all this, you want to be able to have a life, and you want to be able to have a family and have that work-life balance. Um, you have all these things. One of the cool things about my job is that I get to sort of work with imaging, and so we get to look at X-rays and CAT scans and MRIs, and we get to interpret that and go over those with patients. And so, as an orthopedist, that's sort of one of the main things that I do is sort of looking at imaging and sort of reviewing, treatment plans with patients and how to go about helping them. As an orthopedic surgeon, what are we treating? Well, orthopedics is bones, right? It's bones, it's ligaments, it's tendons, it's any of those things. So it's pretty much anything that can happen to those things. Most people know us from fractures, right? So things break, we fix them. You can fix them in a couple different ways. You put casts on them, you place some screws and rods and all sorts of different things. You can have muscular injuries, so ACL tears and tendon tears and muscle tears that you're fixing. Obviously, so in the Super Bowl, this year, I forget which player it was, but he ruptured his Achilles tendon right there on the sideline. So that's going to be an orthopedic surgeon who's going to deal with that. Orthopedic surgeons, they treat nerve problems, so carpal tunnel. As a pediatric surgeon, dealing with growth abnormalities, scoliosis, pretty much. There's a huge range of things that as an orthopedic surgeon that you're going to do, that you're going to see in a given day, especially if you're a general, you're working with the general orthopedics. So for example, one of the things that you may have is a sprain, right? So we have someone who come in and you're really trying to determine, okay, is this something that's mild, where they can just do a little bit of exercise and a brace, expect them to get back better. It's baseball season, you should make your games, or is it something that's severe where we need to go in and we need to do surgery because it's there's something that needs to be reconstructed and you're out of your season. So that's just sort of one of the things that we do. Fractures, of course, these are some of the casts that come back. One of the top left, I think I have to figure out which practice it was, one of the local pediatric practices in the area. We had a contest who could make the best cast, and they made a Thanos cast. So that was pretty cool. But then fixing things in various different ways of surgery is just an X-rays, not of any particular nature. And the goal, of course, we want to improve people's function and their quality of life and decrease their pain and minimize it. So, in the orthopedic realm, this is what we do and why we treat. I don't think this video is actually going to come up, unfortunately. I think I tried it earlier and it wasn't working. But, I put this video of why we treat. So this is the story, and it's actually on Google or whatever, so it's not, I just pulled this off the public website. This is a story, and when we talk about why we treat, you sort of think of that person, right? So for all of us, there's sort of that story that we're like, wow, like that really is why I'm doing that. So this was a young man. He was probably about 17 years old. He had cerebral palsy. He also had some other conditions that basically made it very difficult for him to move his limbs. So He was unable, he had a neurologic condition that wouldn't allow him to coordinate the movements of his arms and legs. So when he would want to move his arm, it would just sort of randomly move. And when he wanted to move a leg, it would just sort of randomly move. So he really couldn't walk because he couldn't control his limbs well. And so I was actually able to participate in his care, in some of his treatment. And, this news story is actually him walking across stage for the first time in his life. So him actually publicly walking was him walking across stage to receive his high school diploma. And so, this is one of the things you look back at. It's just really cool to say, like, I was able to participate in that. And they actually did a whole news segment on it. I think he got some kind of recognition from the Emmy Association out in California about this thing. But it was just a great story, and he's a great young man. I know he raises community service around locally. I think he's in Pennsylvania, around Scranton, I think. He gets coats for the homeless, and he does a lot of great community service things. And that's disability on the outside or not. People do great things when they're with you. So, we sort of think about why you do something. We're going to talk about finances and all this stuff, and I know money is a big thing for everyone, but that's not going to keep you in it. That's not going to make you love what you do. That's not going to keep you going into work every day. It's going to be stories where you can really put a face on a face and a name with what you did. And when I say what you did, it's not you personally, but what you were able to do for someone else. Because that's really what matters in this whole thing. So, and I'll sort of skip this. We're going to wind up doing questions and answers, but people of course want to know what like surgery, how long the surgery, what service, how to do them. So as we get time, we'll sort of go through that. And then, so this is sort of the statistics part. And when I say statistics, it's numbers, right? So a lot of people wanted to know what are the facts, right? So tell me about the numbers. So here we go. So we're talking about the numbers. And so first of all, let's go back. Let's get a little interactive again. So we're talking about what's in demand, right? So right now, when we're talking about demand in America, is it primary care? Is it specialty care? Do we just need doctors in every specialty? Sort of seeing what people's thoughts are in terms of what is the need, and then this is sort of where the need is currently. This is always good to throw one of these in, sort of wakes everybody up, gets us going again. So most people are saying, primary care, and then some are in specialty care, and then about a third of us, we really need doctors across the board. So great responses. So when we look at it, the most in-demand specialties are going to be your primary care doctors, right? So these are the ones that we need. These are the ones in our community. These are going to be the ones who are the first line of healthcare anywhere that you go, whether that's family medicine or psychiatric medicine or internal medicine. That was the need when I went to med school. Probably been the need the past 20 years. It's currently the need now, and it's a hard job to see people and to meet them where they are and to treat. From one moment, especially in family medicine, you could treat a baby, you could treat a 6-month-old, and you can go treat a 60-year-old, back to back. So these are the specialties that really do impact the most people, but they don't get all the attention in the limelight sometimes in some of the specialties, and they're not necessarily glorified in all these TV shows. And so you can sort of see here all these things are really sort of primary care type of things. There's not a lot of specialty stuff up here, if you will. And then you sort of look at salaries. Well, I think this is up to 2022. I think they just probably put something out for 23 recently. And this is just sort of, public information as to, well, what, on average, what are salary trends for doctors? And like I said, this is often what I wanted to know when I was in high school. Okay, how much money do you make? And so you can sort of see the trends going up. And you also see the primary care doctors are at the low end. So, when you look at the specialists, you look at the specialists in purple, and you look at the primary care doctors in the teal or whatever you want to call it, there's a pretty significant difference between the two. So even though the greatest need is there, the compensation isn't as much as a specialist. And that's one of the big troubles about trying to get doctors in some of these specialties. Not the only reason, but it is a reason. And then, we're in America too, so we also have to consider, there is a gender gap. There is a difference between, on average, what men make and what women make. Not saying it's right, not saying I like it, not saying it should be that way. It just sort of is what it is on statistics, and it's one of those things that, from a quality and equity standpoint, as we were talking about, you want those two to come together and do the same thing. But just to know that there is still probably $100,000 difference on average between what men make and what women make across the board. And of course, certain specialties tend to be more for one and another, and different statistics from year to year. But it is there even in medicine, as it is in many other things, many other specialties that are not. So, real question now. So we'll come down to, what is the average orthopedic surgeon salary, since we're talking about orthopedic surgeons? Sort of at $100,000 increments, starting at $250 and going up to over $750. So this is going to be on average. Be interesting to sort of see where people are on this. Still coming in. And I will say, like I said, this is an average, so there's going to be surgeons who are going to make all of these different numbers. So it's not really a wrong answer here, but just to see what the group says. So because the group sounds like you all may have done some of your research. So I like that swath who's at 6% who's saying we're gonna make 750 plus, and you're gonna go do that. So just the fact that you're saying that's what I'm going for, you're gonna do it. And there are surgeons who do that. So it's not the average salary, but some of your spine surgeons, some of your specialty surgeons, they are gonna do that. So we have a good amount who are in the 650 to 750 range. We also have a good amount, about a quarter, 25% in the 450 to 550 range. So that seems to be the two largest, and that's followed by the 350 to 450. And then, so you can sort of see here. So actually looking at statistics, and I pulled it from a couple different sources just to sort of see here, but it's sort of going to be that on average 550 to 650. So this was pulled from two different sources. For I think 2022, one source had 557, one source had 624. You can also see some of the other specialties here that are sort of broken out. So not everybody may be interested in orthopedic surgery. So you may want to sort of look and see if there's something else here that you may have some interest in on this chart here, just as to what average salary. So this is from New York to California to Alabama to Georgia, right? So it's going to be a difference whether you're in the cost of living and the salary compensation in California and New York compared to some other locations. So and then just sort of looking a little bit more locally in Delaware. So I think I just pulled this from salary.com. So orthopedic surgeon, it has it about 550. So pediatric orthopedic surgeon, it's going to, on average, about, 409 on this comparison. So in terms of orthopedic surgery, pediatrics is going to be on the low end. On the high end, like I said, is going to be like your spine surgeons, some of your joint surgeons are going to do pretty well. But in terms of pediatrics, that's it sort of is what it is. I'm not going to say, to some people that may be a large number, to some people that may be an average number, so some people that may be a small number, right? So our 750 crowd, that's a small number to them. They're like, nope, I'm going to go for it. So I definitely encourage you to do that. That's just sort of pulling statistics. But then, as I sort of said, it really comes down to satisfaction. You get paid. I'll tell you that I have friends and they went for the biggest job and the most money and they're miserable. Or they've moved 2 and 3 times, or they deal with a horrible work environment. I will tell you that to make that kind of money, it's not free. You do have to work. You do have to give up something. You may have to put up with something or go to a location that is not ideal. I'm not saying that has to be the case. You can also do that for yourself and create for yourself as well. But there's always a trade-off with everything that you do. So don't make the assumption that just because salaries are a certain level that people are happy. And I think that's one of the things you do want to assess in medicine is just burnout, happiness. Would people do it again? I think a lot of people in orthopedics, we work really hard to get here. We like what we do, like our patient population. So you look at, would you choose medicine again? This poll sort of said that 78% of orthopedists would do it again, or as high as 97%. So we like doing what we do, but you definitely want to consider being happy with what you do. When you're looking at patient satisfaction, this is a really big thing right now. You're going to see it in all the literature. You're going to see burnout. You're going to see people wanting to switch, wanting to get out, wanting to do other things, and just looking at why people want to do what they want to do, and what's the most rewarding part of your job, and I think this is just doctors in general. I don't think this is specifically for orthopedists, but if you see the top is relationships with the patient. It's going to be relationships with people. It's not going to be how much money you make. It's going to be your connection with people and what you're doing with people, and that you're happy with how you're working that you're happy working with people, right? And you're getting that satisfaction of helping them with an unknown diagnosis or helping them to do something better with it. And then the most challenging parts of your job, right? So we deal with insurance, and you're going to hear that across the board from a lot of us. We deal with a lot of regulations and computers and different things, working long hours. And so there's all sorts of different reasons why, it may be a challenge to be in it. So you want to consider these things, right? Especially since a lot of us are in high school and we sort of think like, well, I want to be a physician, right? And then this is burnout. And burnout really is taking out a lot of doctors these days and making it so they're sort of jaded and not really happy with doing what they're doing. And that lack of satisfaction really does translate into your work performance. And so when you look at why people are burnt out, we do a whole lot of paperwork. Oh my goodness, we do paperwork. We do charting and paperwork and operative reports, a bunch of stuff that doesn't make any sense to us, but they tell us that we have to do it anyway. And so, most of that burnout is from that. Sometimes you have to work with people you don't like. Doctors sometimes aren't the nicest people in the world. So, sometimes they have a bit of an attitude, or sometimes they may say something that they're not supposed to say. And so, working with our colleagues. And then some people aren't compensated adequately or don't have autonomy. And so there's different sort of reasons that tend to contribute to burnout. These are some of the main reasons that we document. So, and these effects can affect your career plan. And whether you want to get out early and retire or look into another career, there's a lot of movement around between practices and doctors and hospitals. So that sort of talk about all that. This is sort of the last question, I think. So, we sort of put the money up there. Would you consider taking less pay for a better work-life balance, or would you prefer to, or would you prefer to, take the pay? Oh, I don't think it's coming. I don't think this one is coming up. Oh, there it is. You might as well be honest, right? This is totally anonymous, so I don't see anybody's name or anything next to anybody. Um, I think that's 90% would consider, right? The word consider taking less pay for better work-life balance, and you're going to notice this in the real world. And this is not, once again, this is not just one of those medicine things. This is whatever you do. Look at the people who are doing the thing you want to do. Look at where they are in life. Look at where they are 10, 20 years down the road. Or would you be happy being that person? Would you be happy, living the way that person lives, right? If you're making $750,000, but you've been divorced 3 times, your kids don't know your name, or they don't like you, you're from here to there. You may consider, that as opposed to someone who's in a stable situation and they're enjoying their kid's baseball game, and yeah, they're not working as much, they're not making as much, but they're doing different things in life. So and that's in like Wall Street and all these other things too. So not just medicine. So when we look at our work-life balance in orthopedics, about 50% of us say yes, about 50% say no. And we want to take vacation. So this is sort of the average of the amount of vacation, that we take. I'd say 3 to 4 weeks. If we can get it, I think that's the highest number of how much we take. I think a lot of us are in the 1 to 2 week category. A lot of us tend to be sort of, we tend to be workaholics, or we sort of take vacation. We sort of incorporate conferences and things with us. Last slide here. This is just where I got some of my resources. So, that's sort of the compensation report, the micro investor. So these are sort of where I got some of those statistics and numbers from. Our academies are sort of the Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. So that's sort of the main academy for orthopedists. POSNA is sort of for pediatric orthopedic surgery. So, they have information there as well. General information just about pediatric orthopedics and injuries and treatments and those things, sort of getting more to the kids. So it's just some general resources if people are interested. And that's it. So definitely would be interested to sort of hear your questions, or try to not talk too long, and to give some time for questions.
Great, thanks so much.
And I'm back. All righty. Thank you very much, Doctor. Okay. Elaine asks, would there be any dual enrollment programs in high school and college now that would cut the years it would take to be a pediatric physician surgeon later?
So my answer is, I would say yes. So I'm going to say that I don't know specifically. When I was coming along, there were, and I'm sure there still are, many of the, there are sort of partnerships between, whether it's high school and college, or college and med school, that can sometimes cut out a year or two. And so I think I was considering one of those programs that I think cut out 2 years. If you're doing AP level classes and things like that, that may cut out, some of the college time as well. I would just, caution is not really the right word. I'd say I'd be aware to enjoy the journey and enjoy getting there. You're going to work hard for a long time. You will. And to like skip through, or to fast track some of the times where you're sort of meant to have relationships, and you're gonna have some of these times where you're learning yourself, and you're learning what you want and why you want. Just I say be aware during that, because realistically, I didn't really know. So I knew I wanted to be a doctor when I was 5 years old. But I didn't really know I wanted to be a doctor until I was a freshman or a sophomore in college, when my counselor said, well, you made this decision when you were 5 years old. Like, do you think you should consider it a little bit further than that, than just your whole life, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a doctor, right? And then to have some reasons behind it. And then even then, you get to medical school, and in 4 years, and truthfully, it's more like 8 months of rotation, realistically, when you go on your clinical rotation. What do you want to do? And you need to start applying for residency to get in, because you got about 6 months while they're doing the application process. So, you're really making life decisions very quickly that are going to affect the rest of your life. So the answer to your question is yes. And consider all those things around that socially as well.
All righty. And Pamela asks two questions. Was anyone in your family already in medicine, and who encouraged you to consider this path, or was this an entirely internal path that you chose?
So no one was specifically a doctor. My uncle, I mean, he's pretty close. He's a periodontist, so he does lots of dental work. He does implants. He does a lot of that. So I mean, really, he is sort of an oral surgeon, but wasn't specifically a doctor. My mother has a PhD. She's not a physician, and then the rest of my family did not. So the first one that went down this path. Like I said, it was one of those things that I used to like watching National when I was 5 years old. I used to like watching National Geographic. Back then, they used to put surgeries on TV where you could like watch a whole surgery and like watch a total knee replacement on cable, which I thought was like the coolest thing to do. And it's when you're that young, you sort of say you want to be a doctor, and everyone very much encourages, like, oh, well, he's going to be a doctor. Like Justin's going to be a doctor when he's, and you just hear that over and over and over again, right? And I'm saying this because I'm sure some of our students on here have had a similar story where once your parents and your grandparents, everybody's like, oh, well, Johnny's going to be a doctor and Sue's going to be a doctor, and it just gets, So yes, I was encouraged, but like I said, I ultimately had to make, the decision for myself, and because in the end, you're the one that's going to be doing the work.
Doing it and doing it and doing it. Right. Abigail says, I'm interested in urology, disability awareness, and public policy. In your professional opinion, how can I, or more broadly, how can one blend advocacy with an area of interest in medicine?
So the great thing about medicine is that you can do all these things all at once, in whatever way you want to. So, blending policy, blending advocacy, it almost comes with it. You have to want to do it, right? So it is an extra thing. You have to want to do it. But those to me make the best physicians. The ones who don't just go into their clinic and treat their patients and they're in a bubble, but they're out advocating for, what they're interested in and policy. It's one of the reasons why I think that we haven't affected healthcare in as positive a way as we can, because there's not many, I'll say not many, but there are not as many physicians who really want to be involved in those public type of things and advocacy. So to do that, you really just sort of put your hand up and say, this is what I stand for. This is what I want. There are plenty of political action committees out there. The AMA has a whole chapter for nothing but just advocacy, has for nothing but policy. Your state is going to have, Delaware, any of these states is going to have, an arm of a local committee who is going to do that. I mean, in Delaware, there's a huge push right now with concussion, and the politicians. If you actually Google your congressman or woman and their politician, a lot of them have stances on medical issues. Like I said, concussion's one right now. And that's sort of what they ran on. That's the platform that got them elected. So, even to today, you can do something related to that. And as you do it, you learn how to do it better, and you learn how to do it more. So you learn how to do it better in college. You learn how to do it better in med school. And you learn how to do bigger things. You learn how to put on a health fair. So in medical school, the students put on the health fair, right? We didn't have I mean, our professors would have done it. I mean, it wasn't But the students were like, no, we want to put on a health fair for St. Louis, and students did it, and then we found some doctors to staff it for us, and that's what we did, right? So you don't have to have it doesn't have to be a big global thing, but you just have to want to do it, and you will.
What was the most common thing you treat, and what is the rarest thing you've treated?
Oh boy. So common things, I'd say, probably fractures, right? So people are breaking every day, and especially as it gets warm, more things happen. So I treat a lot of wrist fractures. I treat a lot of ankle fractures, a lot of sprains, things like that. So put a lot of casts on. Um, so that's probably the most thing. In terms of the rarest, there's some pretty rare sort of genetic conditions that can really affect children. Um, and whether it's cerebral palsy, but then there's some that are sort of neurologic conditions as well. Some muscular dystrophy, which you sort of you can also be the person who sort of helps with the diagnosis because they may come see you for the first time because they're having some problems with their legs and cramps, things like that. I will say for me, the most rewarding thing is some of these rare things that people have sort of horrible experience. In medicine, like I said, doctors aren't always the nicest people. They've been told very negative things for their whole life. And, my job is to make it as functional as possible and to do what you're able to do. And so some of these things that, they've been told horrible things their whole life, it's like, no, my goal is to help you to walk. My goal is to help you to go to prom. My goal is to help you get across it. I mean, that young man that I talked about earlier, his condition is not common either. It's pretty rare. But, his outcome was even more rare. I'd say that's the most rare outcome that I've seen. Someone who's never really publicly walked to walk across a stage. And yes, it was with assistance, and yes, it was with a walker, and yes, it was with all these different things. But that's probably the rarest outcome that I've seen, and that's the one that I'm also the most proud of.
All righty. Yeah, certainly any time spent at Nemours, which is way back in 1974, where I did a lot of volunteer work. Boy, we saw a lot of interesting things there. I was in high school. I'm just curious, how accurate do you think Gray's Anatomy is when it comes to orthopedic surgery?
Fairly sensationalized. It's entertainment. It's not. So, I mean, they use orthopedic terms and they use medical terms, and they're actually medical terms in their medical diagnoses. They do find the most interesting ones in the textbook to portray. So those are not things that frequently happen, even though they happen almost every week. And the relationships would tear down a hospital. I would say if that happened. But it's entertainment, but they do use real terminology and real diagnoses for these things.
Right, but it's not necessarily representative of the real world.
At all.
Right. What was the name of the book you showed on the presentation earlier? I think way back in the beginning.
I think one will start with why. The author of that is Simon Sinek. That was one will start with why, and the second one was the compound effect, and that's by Darren Hart.
Right. Okay. Kathy asks, interesting slides regarding salaries and satisfaction. Sorry if you mentioned this, I came late. As a surgeon, how well do you get to know your young patients?
Great question. So I think there's sort of two main categories of patients for me as a surgeon. And one is going to be the acute care, right? So someone comes in, they break their ankle, and I don't see you, we fix it or we put you in a cast, and I don't see you until the next time you break your ankle, right? So that could be 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, or maybe never, right? And so and then some people, they just tend to break frequently, like every year. So we get to know them a little bit better. So that's sort of the one. The other is sort of, my patients who have these chronic illnesses. And those are the ones that I get to know, and those are the ones that I get to follow literally from the time they're born till the time that they're leaving, their parents and graduating. So I do have the opportunity to follow those kids and literally watch them take their first steps, watch them do some of these things, very similar to what a primary care doctor would do. And I think that's one of the pluses about doing things related to primary care or longitudinal medicine, because you do get to see those changes over time. So you get to know those patients very well, you get to know those families very well, and it's one of the fun parts of the job.
All right. Jenna asks, what do you do in your clinic during your workday before you go on the floor?
So in the clinic, that's so I guess not before, but in the clinic, so I may be prepping for the clinic. So usually I'm sitting down looking at, okay, we have 20 people coming in today, look at their x-rays, sort of look and see maybe what the emergency room report is, look and sort of see why they're coming in, if there's any sort of information. So ideally when you sort of come, I sort of have an idea of why you're here, what we're doing, have an idea of what treatment plan it is. But then when I see you in the clinic, sort of say, oh, how are you? Like what happened? Oh, you fell at the roller skating rink, and then you're getting a history. So you're doing that thing where the history is the most important, I think, in any medical profession, right? You want to know the story, why it happened, what happened, what'd you do at Cornell, because that's really going to tell you, it's more than just a picture. While I may look at x-rays and I may look at CT scans and MRIs, I really want to know what happened, how it happened, and the circumstances around it, because that's going to be the most important thing in treating a patient. And then, of course, we do whatever is necessary to treat them and follow them up and those things. So that's often what I'm doing in the clinic, and all the things that sort of showed you what we treat, sports injuries and fractures, that, any of those things may walk into the door in a given day.
Right, right. And I'll agree with someone who's here as an anonymous attendee. There was a great presentation. We all enjoyed the fact that you made it interactive, and I'm definitely going to be emailing you to find out more about how you did that and didn't use the built-in Zoom tools. That was pretty smart. Are residencies, fellowships paid, or when do you start actually making money?
So, yes, they're paid. Actually making money, I think, is going to be subjective, depending on what your version of actually making money. So I did my residency at Howard from 2005 to 2010. If I remember right, I think my salary started at $30,000 a year, and I think I probably finished at about 45,000 by the end of 5 years. This was in Washington D.C. So I think that was so technically it's paid. At the time when I started, we were the doctors sort of made fun of us because they had newly instrumented the 80-hour work week, which just basically means you're not allowed to work more than 80 hours at a time. So you can sort of consider, right, when we think about jobs, a normal job is 40 hours for full time, right? So if you think of a normal job as 40 hours, double that and get paid half. So so that's what I did for 80 hours.
That is the true definition of paying your dues.
Oh, and then I think the next question was, when do you start making money? So like I said, it depends on your definition, depends on if you're doing something additional. So once you technically have an MD, so once you graduate from medical school, you have an MD. You may not have specific training. You can be a general practitioner. So you don't necessarily have to go to residency. There's not many of those out there anymore. But with an MD, there are sort of side things that you can do, right? So you can do consulting for businesses, you can do consulting for insurance companies, you can do other things, right? So there's more than just doctoring you can do with an MD. So depending on how entrepreneurial you are, most of us are going to go into residency, and then after that, it depends on if you go into fellowship or not. That's sort of an extended residency, or whether you sort of go out to the workforce then, and then from there, that's when these sort of salaries kick in. But now, mind you, I showed you averages. This includes people who are working to 65 years old, who would put in their dues, who would work their way up the chain. As an early career, you're going to start at the bottom, and you're going to be at the bottom of that average. And then you're going to work your way up as your career advances and as your skills and experience advances. So, but we'll put it this way: you start paying your loans when you sort of finish that final residency or fellowship. That's when you have enough money to actually pay these loans, which you've accumulated over the last 8 years.
Right. So along those lines, student loans and the amount of debt that physicians and dentists come away with is something of interest and concern. Can you speak not necessarily about your own personal situation, but in general about how long does it take to clear that student loan debt for physicians?
So it depends on I think it depends on your financial upbringing, and it depends on your approach to loans and credit and money in general. So, and credit cards and those kind of things. Because when you get to medical school, they're going to put you on a 30-year plan, more than likely. There's all, at least when I was there, it may be up to 40 because it may be higher now. But when I was there, 30-year plan was pretty much standard for most of us. I think tuition was like $50,000 a year. So, and that was just medical school. That didn't count undergrad, whatever you had. Um, and so, there was one, and so consider this. So, right. So let's just say we'll pick one of those average. I think it was like $400,000 a year in orthopedic surgery, right? So let's say you're making $400,000 a year. You come out, you're making real money now. Like that last question said. What are you doing with that real money? Well, first of all, the government's going to take a good third of it. So that's third of that's going to be wiped off the top. But what's left, it's still a significant amount of money. So, are you going to live in the doctor's house, in the doctor's neighborhood, drive the doctor's car, take the doctor's vacation, do the doctor's things that quote unquote doctors do? And I'm saying that in very loose air quotes because these are all just fantasies. Or are you really focused on getting out of debt? So I have seen one of the doctors. She was in Louisville, Kentucky. She buckled down for 5 years and paid off everything. Right. So she just said she living in a, because think about this. You're coming out you just made, we'll say $50,000 a year as a resident. You're not used to making a lot of money. There is no reason why all of a sudden you need to spend $200,000 unless you just really want it, right? And so, if you adjust, if you're coming out of residency and you don't change things significantly, but you make a dedicated effort, I've seen people pay it off in 5 years. I've seen people pay it off in 10 years. I've seen people in their 60s still paying it off. So, that's sort of my perspective.
And they're driving McLarens and wearing Rolexes probably. What's the longest surgery you've ever been into, and what was it about?
Oh, wow. So I think the longest was probably a kid with cerebral palsy. There was one that was also a kid who had spina bifida, who had spine surgery. They were both probably about, well, the cerebral palsy one, and that was one where we were doing things on both sides, so both legs, both arms. I think that one was about 14 hours. The spine one, I remember that one. We started at 7 a.m. and we didn't finish about 10 p.m. I was actually an assist on that one of the spine surgeons. But that was a complex kid who had a congenital problem with their spine, and they had a very bad scoliosis. And so, but of course, with that, you take your time. There's lots of different things that you're doing to make sure that everything's safe throughout the whole thing. You just sort of stand back and take a little bit of a break and a little bit of a water break, though. But those are probably the longest. I did those early, and you realize that it's better to break some of these things up. You see other people do them, and then you start to either bring another surgeon in so that you can get it done quicker, or you start to break these things up so that you're not doing so much at once. Because ideally, someone may need a lot done, but you don't necessarily always want to do everything all at once, to minimize surgery. And that's one of the things you sort of learn, what's the best for everyone.
Right. I'll get to that question in a minute. How does your involvement in clinical and academic research enhance your approach to treating pediatric orthopedic conditions, particularly those related to cerebral palsy and neuromuscular conditions?
Well, so research is really just testing a hypothesis and trying to prove your hypothesis. So especially in clinical research, a lot of us sort of, by seeing what we see every day, have an idea of what might work or what we think could work or what could work better. But until you sort of have evidence to say that this consistently works, it may just work for you, right? It may just seem to have good outcomes and it's lucky, but that's sort of how medicine has progressed, to say, well, I think I can do it a little bit different. I think I can do a little bit better. Let me get a swab of patients and let's see. Let's put that against the standard, or let's put that against another major surgery or something else like that. And then you get your data, you put it together, you present it to other doctors, and you go to conferences and you talk about these things, and they say, oh wow, I thought about that. Have you ever thought about doing it this way? Or, let's combine and let's pull our patients together and let's see if a larger number. So you start to get into these collaborations, you start to think differently. It's really what sparks a lot of communication in medicine. You sort of get ideas, you go to a conference and you sort of see what other people are doing, and then you start doing it, and you start to spread medicine. So, academic and clinical research really is how medicine moves forward. Whether you're on the cutting edge of doing it yourself, and that could either be at an institution who's doing it, that could be as a private practice who's doing it, or you're going to the conferences and you're trying to implement those things that you're seeing what Stanford and UCLA and NYU are doing, and you're like, well, I could try that as well. So, I'd say that's how it definitely can affect what you're doing.
All righty. And a last question from me. This is definitely the age of augmented and artificial intelligence, or augmented reality, artificial intelligence. Is that entering into your clinical practice yet?
It is. I think in medicine, we're still figuring it out. But my personal view of AI is that it helps. It can be abused, obviously, but it can also help us do what we do better. And specifically, they're looking a lot of it in radiology, and looking at X-rays and mammograms and scans and things like that. Because there's certain patterns that, like in a mammogram, for example, which is not my specialty, but in a mammogram, there's certain patterns that, that can be recognized by an AI system, where a human may or may not miss some of these things, or some things that are small and subtle. So you still need the human skill set. You still need the human eye, the human logic. Sometimes AI can help enhance what we're looking at and what we're doing. There's also sort of assisted procedures where it's not necessarily using AI, but you're using different tools and instruments in 3D real time to help you to get into places that were previously pretty difficult to get into. It helps a lot with that. For me personally, I will say ChatGPT helps me with my letters of medical necessity. So when I need a wheelchair for a person with cerebral palsy, I type in, how do I write a medical letter of necessity for a person with cerebral palsy who, has these different things, and it spits out a nice start for me, and that helps me quite a bit with sort of getting through some of this paperwork that I would have to sort of pick up all on my own, especially when it's things like that. So you still need the person, because the other thing is with these services as well is that they're scraping the internet for just random information. That information may or may not be correct. So you definitely want to be careful with how you use it. But it can sort of get things sort of flowing sometimes, make things like a little easier.
Right. All right. Well, Dr. Connor, thank you very much for closing out this series with us. Everyone, thank you very much for joining us. Christy, as always, a pleasure to work with you. And the next series, which is MiniMed North, starts on April the 10th, and we will be sending out an email about that to all of you who have been attendees for MiniMed South. Thanks. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.